Hey, thank you, Russ. And more importantly, thank you to all of you. I've spent the last 2 days talking to our customers, our partners, the industry analysts. These are some of the sharpest minds in the world. The conversations have been, frankly, fantastic. What was common throughout those conversations, though, was the need for a unified approach to cybersecurity. Now, I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so walking you through our vision for Vision 1. Okay, and how AI is influencing the product direction. So first, let's talk about risk. Okay, risk is not a product. Risk is part of the plan. Okay, so we need to stop treating risk as an interruption, and we need to start thinking about it more as an input. And when we do that, it means that we can start to ask much better quality questions. So, one question, for example. What could disrupt that plan? Okay. Now, we're not talking about a paper-based exercise. We're not talking about a compliance exercise here. What we're talking about is understanding those real cyber risks that are inside your environment. Things like exposures, misconfigurations, threats, attack paths, and things like that. So once we understand those risks, of course, next, we need to be able to respond to them. And how we respond to them varies. So, for example, we might take a proactive response. If you've got an internet-facing asset with a critical severity vulnerability on there, and hey, RDP just got popped open to the internet, that's something that's pretty important. Now, traditionally, SOCs don't focus on pre-boom. They're waiting for something to happen and then take an action. And I think we're going to see a shift in that behavior going forward. Imagine if we'd patched that vulnerability, then that host would never have been compromised, and it would never have led to that incident hitting in the SOC. So most security teams are forced to react after reality has already changed, after the exposures have happened, after the attackers have adapted, and ultimately after the business has already taken on that risk. But what if we could test decisions, controls, and resilience before reality forces that outcome? So what we want to do here is we want to move away from static assessments towards continuous validation. And you've heard that from several of the people on the stage over the last 2 days. So by using simulation, prediction, and adversarial testing, we can start to achieve that. So TrendAI are building a cybersecurity digital twin. That gives you a completely new way to understand your cyber risk. It's a virtual replica of your environment. Using that, we can start to safely simulate attacks. We can start to validate defenses, and we can start to predict risk. And this gives you a living model of your environment. So let's dive in and take a closer look at what this looks like then. So what we have now is a completely new lens on your environment. This is an immersive, interactive experience to be able to explore your attack surface in a truly new way. So as you can see on the video now, what we can start to see is we're zooming in to the risk of the environment. We're starting to see those assets, the risks, the relationships. We can see the connections. We can see the dependencies. We can see the blast radius. And in the example on the screen, ultimately what we're seeing there is that there's a risky cloud asset. And why is it risky? Well, actually, if you follow the path back, it goes back to an on-premise device, back to a user, back to a risky service account. So in under a minute there, Vision 1's giving you all of that context that normally teams would spend hours trying to manually piece together. Now, this sounds like a really simple question, but honestly, security teams have been struggling to answer this for years. The problem's not a lack of data, the problem is a lack of clarity or a lack of certainty. Now, what changes is our ability to model and simulate that and validate the risk before it ever becomes a reality. So even though exposure management. We've talked a lot about exposure management and vulnerability management over the last 2 days. And even though I'm really pleased to say that exposure management's one of our fastest ever growing solutions, over 9,000 customers in just about 2 years there. So that's great, but not all risks actually create meaningful, not all exposures actually create meaningful risk. So what we need to be able to do here then is we need to be able to focus on the exposures that are actually exploitable. So let's say just start off with a simple question. Hey, what's my riskiest asset? So vision one here is pulling together all that connected telemetry, the relationships, the exposures, the behaviors. But why? Why is this asset the riskiest one in my environment? Well, vision one's prompting you, saying, hey, you might want to have a look at the attack paths here. And so now what we're seeing here are the predicted attack paths. These pale red lines you can see behind me. These are the probable routes that an attacker could take to get into your environment. Each hop is rich in telemetry. And again, this is not a static diagram. It's a living visual representation of your attack paths. Now, predicting attack paths is cool, and it's helpful, and it's necessary in some cases. But what we're seeing here is what an attacker might do. But when we start to simulate and we start to validate, what we're now doing is proving what an attacker can do. And this is where adversarial exposure validation is removing the guesswork without ever touching your production environment. So we started off with those pale red lines, those predictions. After the simulation and the validation, we can see that actually those that were not exploitable, they've now turned blue. We don't need to worry about those ones. But again, by leveraging that simulation, that adversarial exposure validation, we can now see we've got some bright red lines. These are the attack paths that are actually exploitable in your environment. And these, of course, are the ones that you need to start to prioritize the remediation for. So, okay, we know we've got these attack paths, we've validated them, they're real. But what's the next question your board's going to ask you? Okay, when you're saying, hey, can I have X million dollars to go fix this thing? They're going to say, well, what's the cost? What's the risk? And boards don't understand risk indexes and risk scores. They understand financial and quantitative metrics. And so what we need to do here is we need to be able to quantify the risk to our boards. And so this is where cyber risk quantification comes into play. What we're doing now is we're translating technical risk into business risk. Now, this gives you a solid, defensible basis to go and seek that investment, because now we're saying, hey, look, we've prioritized this, we've validated this, the risk is real, and this is what it's going to cost. So next stage then, okay, now we understand what the financial impact is. Next question is, okay, well, how are we going to fix that? How do we mitigate it? Or better still, how are we going to remediate it? And once we've done that, what's the effect on my cyber risk? How much is it going to reduce my cyber risk by? And so exposure management solutions typically will give you a list of prioritized exposures. Okay, and to be fair, different solutions have differing levels of quality. Very proud of our solution. But whilst that's a very big step forward, okay, I know the exposures, we've prioritized them, we've validated them. If we take a different lens here, and we start looking at this from a remediation point of view, a single remediation could actually fix multiple exposures. And that's what we're seeing here on the screen behind me, shifting away from lists of exposures to lists of remediations. And hey, taking it even one step further forward, okay? We know now what we need to do to remediate it. Hey, but Vision 1 is going to build that remediation plan for you. And hey, if that's not enough, again, by leveraging that digital twin, we can now simulate that remediation plan. Behind me, you can see that by removing the local admin rights, actually that attack path's closed down. It's now turned blue. You can see the risk has been removed entirely. Again, all of this without ever touching production. So what makes this possible? How can we build these cybersecurity digital twins? I mentioned AI itself is a big part of that. But crucially, it's the depth of the data behind it. So Vision One's bringing together telemetry, not just from TrendAI sensors, but from, as Rachel talked about yesterday, over 900 different data sources, a huge ecosystem. And what we're doing here is it's not just about data, but when we combine data with more data, what we start to get is context. And when we start to combine context with more context, now we're starting to see actionable intelligence. So what we're at now is an inflection point with AI, okay? On the one hand, over here, we've got risk. It's real, it's fast, it's predatory. On the other side, we have agency, AI systems that are thinking, deciding, and acting on their own. And the uncomfortable truth here is that the more agency we have, the more risk that we have. And so as we start to look, in boardrooms, in SOCs, across the products we're building, these two forces are staring each other down, okay? So what we need to do here is we need to be able to harness that agency without getting eaten by the risk. AI is no longer experimental. It's already embedded into your business, in the applications, in co-pilots, in agents. The problem, again, we've talked about this, most organizations don't have the visibility into where AI exists in their environments. They don't understand how it behaves. They don't understand the risk that it introduces. So this is why we need agentic governance. So what do I mean by agentic governance then? This is about governing AI at enterprise scale with 3 foundational pillars. And Rachel touched on these yesterday as well. The first of those is visibility. Where does AI exist in the organization? We can't protect what we can't see. Secondly, observability. Understanding how those AI systems behave and what decisions they're taking in real time. And then thirdly, action. Now we need to enforce policy, apply guardrails, and respond when AI does introduce risk. So let's talk briefly then about how your organization, how the people in your organization are actually using AI. Because let's face it, whether you've sanctioned it or not, they are using it. So the reality today is, again, most organizations really have no idea what AI is in use inside their organizations. And that's where Vision One's AI Risk Insights can solve that problem. Every tool, every agent, whether it's sanctioned or not, becomes visible in a single place. AI Risk Insights are giving you crucial information, things like prompt attacks, harmful content, data exposure indicators. And without proper governance, these threats are simply going to go unnoticed. Again, part of the problem here, right, is that departments are adopting AI faster than you can keep up with the security policies. And so with AI Risk Insights, shadow AI no longer becomes a blind spot. Still a challenge, but no longer a blind spot. Instead, shadow AI becomes a managed risk that governance stays ahead of. So let's switch out now to our AI inventory. So this is where visibility becomes operational. You can see all of the AI tools in use in your environment. Let's take a double click on Kiro for a moment. So what we can see here now is a fully governed AI system in use inside your organization. It's a single view of who's using it, what integrations it has access to, what sensitive data it's touching. So what changes here now is that we've now got visibility control. AI is no longer implicit or assumed. Now we can start to measure, govern, and enforce. So shadow AI is quickly becoming one of the biggest unseen risks inside the enterprise. And again, employees are adopting AI at such a speed now. Developers are embedding it into workflows. Autonomous systems have access to data and taking decisions independently. What we're talking about here is not about stopping AI innovation. It's about enabling you to embrace AI safely and securely. So as organizations rapidly build out these AI-powered applications and agents, security has to become part of the AI development lifecycle right from the beginning. Here we can see that your AI risk has increased, and we can see here that we have some vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. So let's take a little bit of a closer look here. So part of the challenge that organizations see today is that AI is distributed across so many disparate places. We see it in code repos, CI/CD pipelines, cloud workloads, runtime environments. Typically, you don't have a single view to understand what all the relationships are between this AI. And so that's where Vision One's changing that. We're giving you the context on where that risk is coming from. So here we can see we have an increased number of MCP servers. I mean, I heard the number of MCP servers we had in Trend the other day, and it quite frankly shocked me. So, but what comes with that? It's all great. Everyone's building agents, everyone's building MCP servers, fantastic. But what we're creating here is a huge new attack surface. And so, as we start to drill down into kind of the vulnerabilities and the misconfigurations, like, these are not new things, right? Talking about vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, they've been doing that for years and years. There's nothing new there. What's changed now is that these things are in a form factor that most teams just simply can't keep up with. So let's move on to that third pillar now then, the action, okay? So as you can see here now behind me, Vision One is prompting the user, hey, what do you want to do about that misconfiguration? Do you want to let me fix it? Do you want to reject it? But critically, even though we're leveraging the power of agentic AI, the human remains in the loop. And that's what's critical, because every conversation I have with a customer, they all say, yeah, we want to trust AI. We want to embrace things like automated remediation and autonomous SOC, but we don't have the confidence in it. And I think that's the big takeaway here, is that word, it's confidence. And hey, it's early in the AI journey. But as we start to move forward, confidence will start to increase. If AI asks you 20 times, I suggest you do this, do you want me to do it for you? And you say, well, let me check, yes, okay. If it asks you to do the same thing 20 times and it gave you the right answer 20 times, maybe that starts to increase your confidence. Maybe you start to have the trust that you need there. And so whilst we're talking about vulnerabilities, I do just want to double click on a couple of the points that have been raised over the last couple of days then. So as you can see, Trend know about our vulnerabilities on average 96 days before a vendor patch even exists. So what that means, again, in reality as well, is that we know about that vulnerability 96 days ahead of the big three, for example. How do we do that? We do that with our zero-day initiative. That's the world's largest bug bounty program. We have thousands of researchers across the globe who are submitting these to us in an ethical way. We disclose them to the vendors. And what that means, though, is we know about the vulnerability, and we can start to build protections against those zero-day vulnerabilities. So before anybody else even knows it exists, Trend have already built protection for those. So really, I think in the world of vulnerabilities, I remember a few years ago, hey, this vendor has 77,000 CVEs, this vendor has 78,000 CVEs. It was about who's got the most CVEs. Today, it's not about that. Today, it's about how fast can you detect those vulnerabilities and how fast can you protect against them. So for some of our customers that are familiar with the tipping point range of appliances, you'll know there that we have those zero-day filters inside the endpoint, inside the network appliance. And I'm pretty excited to announce that coming later in Q2, we're going to be harnessing the power of ZDI and bringing that capability to the endpoint as well. And so, okay, we've talked about unified data, governance, AI context. With all of that, it enables us to start fundamentally rethinking the user experience itself. So moving beyond static consoles and disconnected applications to a platform that knows who you are, to a platform that knows what you're responsible for, what matters to you, and helps you make the decisions that you need to make. So it all starts here. Okay? Before any dashboards or alerts or raw data, before any of that, we need to understand, who are you? Are you an engineer? Are you an analyst? Are you a CISO? Now we can start to understand what becomes important to you. And this gives us that baseline for our agentic UX. So let's start off with Connor, for example. Okay? Connor's a security engineer. Vision 1 here is showing him what his top priorities are. There's a server there with a critical vulnerability, some excessive permissions. So that's what he needs to focus on. But not just that, what we can also see here as well is that, hey, whilst Connor was away from screen, Vision 1 was actually looking at the alerts, and 156 alerts have been closed down. So when Rachel was talking yesterday about our agentic SOC, this is what we're talking about. It's that AI triage agent, been able to do that work on behalf of the analyst. Next, let's move to James. James is an incident responder, and we can see a critical incident's been declared here for Hive ransomware. But crucially, what we're given here is all of that context. You can see 5 assets have been compromised. But not only that, we could actually see that 18 gigabytes of data has been staged. In other words, it's been prepared for exfiltration. So now James is inside the incident. He can see the correlated attack line. We've mapped the lateral movement. We've identified the business impact. Now James has got all of the context he needs to start making those intelligent decisions. Hey, top of the house now. Let's take a look at Raymond. Raymond's view is completely different. He's not interested in alerts or queues. What he wants to understand is, what's my cyber posture? What's my risk? What's my risk score, my risk index? He wants to understand what the financial exposure is as well. And so what we're showing here is this is what it means to go from a one-size UX to a user-centric experience. So it's interesting. Jeff Pollard was talking before, and Mike Gibson just mentioned it as well. Hey, security is not a cost center. But unfortunately, all too often, it can be perceived that way. It can be perceived as a blocker, a function that's actually slowing down innovation. But when we start to surface risk earlier, confidence starts to replace fear. AI becomes something that the business can leverage. And this is this shift. This is where security evolves from being a defensive function to an enabler of business transformation. But of course, the whole time, whilst security remains, or humans remain firmly in the loop and in control. So to close out this part of my presentation, I just wanted to say that hey, by reducing our attack surface, by accelerating our detection and response, by governing AI safely at scale, Vision 1 can give you the confidence to embrace AI fearlessly. Thank you.